Welcome, traveler. Tonight, we drift not across land or sea, but through the quiet spaces between recorded time. You have arrived at a moment in history that might not exist. A shadow beneath the archives. A name whispered by curious minds, Tartaria. If this is your first time here, take a breath and settle in. These stories are meant to unfold slowly. If you enjoy journeys like this one, you're invited to subscribe and stay a while. Tell me, too, where and when you're listening from. A quiet kitchen after midnight. A city window at dawn, somewhere far from the noise. Each moment joins the rhythm of our shared wandering. Now, let us begin. There was once, they say, a civilization so vast that its edges dissolved into myth. It was said to have stretched from the frozen lakes of Siberia to the mountains of Central Asia, from the deserts of Persia to the rivers of China. Its name appeared on maps printed centuries ago, yet now it is absent, erased, or perhaps never meant to be found. The word Tartaria first flickers to life in the writings of European cartographers in the 16th century. They drew sweeping lands across northern Asia and labeled them Tartary, a word that felt both ancient and vague. To them, it was the realm beyond comprehension, the borderland between civilization and the unknown. But as time passed, those borders vanished. Modern maps replaced Tartary with familiar nations: Russia, Mongolia, China. The vast empire of the old world was quietly rewritten. What had once been a name that spanned continents became a linguistic ghost. And yet, for some, that absence felt deliberate. They began to ask, how does an empire vanish so completely that even its ruins are uncertain? Could there have been a civilization advanced beyond its time, hidden beneath new layers of narrative? Or was Tartaria simply a cartographer's convenience, an invention born of distance and incomplete knowledge? History, after all, is shaped not only by what we record, but by what we choose to forget. If one stands in the Great Plains of Central Asia today, where the wind drifts unbroken for miles, the imagination stretches easily. Beneath those wide horizons, you can almost sense something sleeping. Cities buried by centuries of erosion. Roads turned to veins of stone, architecture whose purpose we no longer recall. In forgotten corners of old museums and libraries, fragments remain, drawings of strange buildings, towers crowned with impossible domes, copper and marble machines whose use is no longer known. Some say these sketches show remnants of a lost empire. Others call them fantasies of artists who dreamed too far. But what if both are true? Perhaps Tartaria existed not only as a place, but as an idea, a vision of humanity's golden memory, a reflection of what we once were, or could have been, the pattern of an advanced culture rewritten by the centuries until only its name survived. In this idea, the question is not whether Tartaria was real, but what its persistence in the human mind reveals. Why do so many cultures carry stories of forgotten kingdoms, of floods that erased worlds, of towers that touched the heavens and fell? Why do we feel that something vast was lost? The earth keeps secrets in layers of silence. Beneath modern cities lie older stones, older paths. Beneath those, the traces of fire and flood. It is easy to imagine that deep below us, beneath all the accumulated centuries, sleeps the faint imprint of something extraordinary. And yet, if we peel back the speculation, we are left with a more profound question. What does it mean for something to be erased? When an empire falls, its buildings crumble, its records fade, its symbols are absorbed into the languages that survive, but its influence remains, like warmth after a flame. We may not name it, but we feel it. The curvature of architecture, the logic of maps, the mathematics that govern design each carries whispers from civilizations before. Perhaps Tartaria, whether fact or fiction, represents this continuity, the unseen thread that connects lost builders to modern minds, a memory our collective consciousness refuses to abandon. As we move forward, we will not chase proof. We will listen for patterns. We will follow the faint trails that linger in architecture, in energy, in design. We will walk through the corridors of possibility not to declare certainty, but to rediscover wonder. Because whether or not Tartaria ever truly existed, it invites us to question the nature of forgetting itself. What else has been softened by time, rewritten by progress, or hidden beneath new names? The journey begins not in discovery, but in silence, in the spaces where absence speaks more loudly than fact. And so we listen. The silence of the earth is never empty. It hums with the faint electricity of buried time. When explorers and archaeologists cut deep into the soil of Central Asia, they do not just unearth stones, they awaken memory. There are layers beneath layers, traces of foundations that do not match the settlements built above them, walls that seem too precise, too deliberate, for the tools believed to have existed at the time. Patterns in the alignment of ancient structures that appear to follow astronomical logic, as though they were designed to converse with the stars. In the old valleys near the Altai Mountains, there are blocks of granite smoothed as if by machines. Across Mongolia, pillars stand alone in wide fields, aligned to the rising and setting of the solstices. In remote steppes, circular ruins suggest a geometry that once governed something vast. These are not claims, they are quiet observations. The evidence stands, but the story has been erased. Scholars have debated such findings for generations. Some attribute the strangeness to geological coincidence. Others whisper of lost cultures whose mastery of construction rivaled our own. Yet the truth, as always, seems to rest between the two. Perhaps Tartaria was not a single empire, but a memory shared across time, a series of civilizations that rose and fell beneath the same name. Empires reborn and renamed until their origins became a haze. Over millennia, their technologies, be they tools of stone or machines of copper, crumbled back into the earth, leaving only echoes. But still, those echoes align. From the Great Walls of Derbent to the sun temples of Central Asia, there is a resonance in design. Arches that mirror the curves of nature, domes that seem to capture the rhythm of the sky. Each carries an unspoken understanding of harmony between Earth and cosmos. It is here, in these patterns, that the myth of Tartaria gains weight. For myths, by nature, do not emerge from emptiness. They are born from fragments that resist forgetting. Imagine, for a moment, that humanity's timeline is not a straight line, but a tide. Civilizations rise, advance, and recede, leaving behind the seeds for the next. Each age believes itself to be the first, the pinnacle of progress, yet beneath its feet, another age sleeps. If we look at the carvings left behind in regions once called Tartary, we see motifs of energy, light, water, motion, spirals that seem to suggest perpetual flow, architecture that breathes with geometry, not randomness. Could this point toward a philosophy of living in resonance rather than dominance? A civilization that built not to control nature, but to harmonize with it. It is tempting to imagine that Tartaria might have reached a balance we have lost. A world powered not by extraction, but by alignment. Cities designed to amplify natural frequencies, structures that breathed with the seasons. To modern minds, such ideas sound romantic, but the deeper one studies the orientation of ancient buildings, their precise alignments to magnetic north, to solstice sunrise, to lunar standstill, the more intentional they appear. There was an intelligence behind the placement, one that spoke not of superstition, but of knowledge. Some say this intelligence was universal, shared by early cultures across continents. Others suggest it was taught, handed down from a forgotten source, and that is where the mystery of Tartaria sharpens. Because if there was a civilization, or a lineage of civilizations, that once spanned half the world, it must have left traces not only in stone but in story. And it has. Across the myths of Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, we hear of great builders who shaped the land before the known empires, titans who raised towers of light, architects who spoke to the heavens. They appear in Sumerian legend, in the Vedas, in the lost chronicles of Persia, always as figures whose work was later buried by flood, by fire, or by time itself. Could Tartaria be the common memory of those builders, the umbrella name under which their achievements were later gathered by forgotten historians. The idea seems improbable, yet the human mind carries memory in mythic form. Stories outlast maps, and so, when the cartographers of the Renaissance drew Tartaria across their parchment, perhaps they were not inventing a fantasy, but echoing something their ancestors once knew, a vague inheritance of a vast world whose memory still shimmered beneath language. Today, when we see domes rising in ancient mosques, or onion spires touching the clouds of Eastern Europe, we glimpse that same aesthetic, the mathematical beauty that some say was Tartarian, the blending of function and grace, the idea that architecture could be both technology and art, both shelter and instrument. If we follow this thread further, we arrive at a more subtle question. What if the true legacy of Tartaria is not material, but mental? Not the stonework, but the worldview, the understanding that civilization need not be built in opposition to nature, but in dialogue with it. Modern archaeology measures ruins by carbon and strata, but there is another kind of archaeology, quieter and harder to quantify, the archaeology of ideas. It is here that the spirit of Tartaria may still live, the ways we sense balance, the instinct to align our buildings with sunrise, the pull we feel toward harmony in sound, proportion, and space. These might be remnants of a much older way of thinking, not superstition, but intuition inherited through centuries of living with the world, not over it. The memory of Tartaria, real or imagined, continues to whisper because it offers something we have forgotten to seek, a civilization that remembered itself as part of the Earth's rhythm, not its master. And perhaps that is why it had to vanish, not as punishment, but as cycle. Every age must lose something sacred in order to remember it again. We will continue to listen. The more one studies the remnants attributed to Tartaria, the clearer it becomes that geometry was not a tool for ornament, but a language. Across surviving blueprints and ruins, shapes repeat, circles, octagons, spirals, and ratios that seem to breathe with purpose. These were not random decorations. They were alignments meant to connect earth and sky, body and rhythm. In Samarkand, Bukhara, and far beyond, domes rise with uncanny precision, their interiors shaped to capture and magnify sound. A whisper beneath one can travel across the chamber, as though carried by invisible wires. To ancient builders, this was not magic, it was harmony. Structures were tuned like instruments. If Tartaria existed in some form, perhaps its builders understood resonance as a form of energy, the idea that everything vibrates, that sound, structure, and spirit share a common frequency. Modern science echoes this in its own language, through the study of waves, fields, and atomic vibrations. What we call physics may be the rediscovery of something once lived, not just learned. When archaeologists measure the ruins scattered from the Ural Mountains to Eastern Europe, they find megalithic blocks placed with precision difficult to explain. Stones weighing dozens of tons joined so tightly that not even a blade of grass fits between them. The surface is polished smooth as glass, corners exact, curves continuous. It speaks of knowledge we assume was impossible at the time, yet it stands. In the margins of old maps and manuscripts, Tartaria appears as a name sprawling across continents. It is drawn not as a mythic place, but as a real one, with cities, rivers, and mountain ranges. To dismiss it entirely is to assume that hundreds of cartographers, merchants, and travelers shared the same collective era for centuries. That, too, seems unlikely. But what if Tartaria was not a single centralized empire, but a network of cultures connected through shared understanding, a kind of global consciousness that arose before our recorded timeline began? The traces suggest cooperation more than conquest, architecture that speaks the same visual language thousands of miles apart, symmetry that implies exchange of knowledge, not isolation. The further one looks, the more it feels as if humanity once moved under a shared principle to build in reflection of natural order. This would mean that what we think of as ancient technology was not defined by material, but by method, to shape the world not by force, but by correspondence, a civilization that studied how energy moved through form, how sunlight and magnetism interacted with stone, how air could sing within chambers of specific proportion. It raises quiet questions. Did these builders understand gravity differently? Did they perceive vibration and frequency not as abstract science, but as part of life itself? Modern thinkers may call this speculation, but even science admits that resonance shapes reality. Atoms vibrate, energy transfers through waves. The same principles govern sound, light, and even human emotion. Tartaria, if it existed, may have lived by this awareness. To them, the universe might not have been inert, but alive, a participant in creation. And then, something shifted. Civilizations laid themselves atop one another. Conquest replaced communion. Knowledge became guarded, fragmented, and renamed. The geometry remained, hidden in cathedrals, in forgotten masks, in silent courtyards where the stars still reflect at night. But the language that explained it faded. History remembers empires through power, but Tartaria, perhaps, expressed itself through balance. A civilization whose strength lay in symmetry, whose ambition was not expansion, but resonance. This perspective reframes what progress means. We measure advancement by what we build. They may have measured it by how well what they built fit into the world's rhythm. The more evidence is uncovered, intricate waterways that define modern engineering, massive earthen mounds aligned to magnetic fields, and roads running in straight lines across hundreds of miles, the more it becomes clear that we are staring at blueprints we no longer understand. This does not mean alien technology, nor miracles. It may mean a deeper form of science, one that emerged not from domination, but from listening. Imagine cities designed not to defy nature, but to echo it. Towers that amplified light during solstice dawns. Courtyards where rainwater collected not randomly, but in musical patterns. Bridges that resonated with the wind instead of resisting it. Such visions are not fantasy. They are grounded in observation. The ancients were astronomers, engineers, and mathematicians long before we named those disciplines. The farther we travel back in time, the less primitive the world appears. The stones themselves contradict the notion that progress is linear. If Tartaria's ruins are indeed fragments of this forgotten age, then what we have lost is not only their architecture, but their philosophy, the idea that knowledge is not to conquer, but to harmonize. Perhaps this is why the name was erased, not because of conspiracy, but because of transition. The old world yielded to a new one driven by different values. The pursuit of harmony gave way to the pursuit of control. What once connected humanity through resonance now divides it through possession. Yet the memory lingers. The domes still stand. The geometry remains perfect. The earth remembers. And as our modern cities grow taller, more artificial, more detached from the soil that feeds them, we find ourselves yearning for something we cannot name. The feeling that somewhere, long ago, humanity understood how to build with both precision and peace. That may have been Tartaria's true legacy, not the machines, nor the empires, but the balance between wisdom and wonder. A civilization that looked upon the stars not as gods to worship or resources to measure, but as mirrors of itself. And perhaps, in rediscovering that balance, we begin to rebuild what was never entirely lost. When one stands before the remnants of certain ancient structures, there is a peculiar stillness that hums beneath the air. It is not silence. It is a pulse, a subtle rhythm that seems to live within the material itself. The ancients may have understood this in ways we no longer can. They built with the awareness that stone could breathe. In the study of ancient architecture, there are places where granite sings. When struck, the vibration travels through the walls, amplified by chambers that seem designed to carry sound in precise frequencies. This is not coincidence. It is pattern, each block chosen, shaped, and the line to work in concert. The builders, whoever they were, did not force their will upon matter. They invited it to participate. Modern acousticians studying sites from Egypt to Central Asia have measured harmonic resonances that mirror musical intervals, the same ratios found in sound waves, light wavelengths, and even the human heartbeat. The implication is subtle but profound. These monuments were not only shelters or symbols, they were instruments. If Tartaria existed, perhaps its builders perfected this art. They may have harnessed vibration not as mysticism, but as technology, the shaping of stone to move energy, not merely house it. Every pillar, every arch, may have served as a conduit for resonance, acoustic, magnetic, or even electric in nature. Some researchers note that the materials themselves seem chosen with an understanding of conductivity. Granite, rich in quartz, reacts to pressure by releasing electric charge. When these stones are arranged in certain geometries, they form a kind of natural circuitry, not machines in the way we imagine, but living systems of mineral and frequency. The theory grows even more curious when considering how many ancient structures align with telluric lines, those invisible rivers of electromagnetic energy running through the earth. From the great steppes of Central Asia to the plains of Eastern Europe, ruins attributed to the Tartarian world share patterns of placement. They are not random. They sit upon intersections of these currents, as though drawing breath from the planet itself. Modern science speaks of piezoelectricity, of crystalline resonance, of the way certain materials convert vibration into energy. The ancients might not have used these terms, yet they seem to have worked with these truths intuitively. Their instruments were not metallic or mechanical, but geological, the very bones of the earth shaped into purpose. Imagine a city designed around this understanding, streets forming spirals that guide wind, towers aligned to celestial poles, roofs catching the low hum of the planet's magnetic field. A civilization that did not generate power through combustion or consumption, but through attunement. This vision may feel distant, even impossible, yet fragments of it remain. Across Eurasia, beneath newer layers of construction, archaeologists find foundations of brick and stone that do not fit known periods, doorways sealed into earth, arches too advanced for their recorded era, channels that appear to direct energy or water with perfect gradients. It is as if someone once mapped the veins of the planet. The most haunting thought is not that they vanished, but that their works were buried under the weight of time and new belief. Empires rose, renamed, and rebuilt. The meaning of geometry became decoration. The purpose of proportion became aesthetic. A civilization's language was forgotten, not destroyed. In modern laboratories, we experiment with resonance and vibration again. We speak of quantum fields, of frequencies shaping matter, of how patterns can organize chaos. Perhaps we are remembering what was once known. Science and myth often spiral toward each other, speaking in different tongues, but pointing to the same center. The ancients may not have written equations, but they inscribed understanding into stone. Each structure a formula expressed through proportion and placement. Each plaza a reflection of cosmic order, rendered in dust and light. What makes Tartaria's alleged legacy so fascinating is not the suggestion of lost technology, but the attitude behind it. A worldview that saw power not as extraction, but as harmony. A belief that energy, sound, and consciousness were threads of the same fabric. The ruins, if truly remnants of such an age, whisper of humility before the natural world. They remind us that mastery need not mean domination. It can mean listening so deeply that the material world begins to speak back. To the modern mind, this sounds poetic. To the ancient builder, it may have been practical. A wall that hums at a healing frequency. A temple that aligns with solstice light. A fountain designed to mirror the rhythm of the stars. Somewhere within these ideas lies a quiet truth. That technology can be sacred when it honors balance. Perhaps Tartaria's greatness, if it was real, was not in its reach, but in its restraint. The ability to use knowledge without severing its connection to wonder. And perhaps this is what we have forgotten, that to build something lasting, one must understand not only the structure, but the silence within it. The breath of stone still lingers in the ruins. It hums beneath the feet of those who walk among them, even now, waiting to be heard again. Time does not erase, it layers. Each new century lays its dust upon the last, until the surface becomes smooth again, and memory slips quietly beneath it. What we call disappearance may only be concealment. What we call the fall of a civilization might be the slow settling of its breath into the soil. If Tartaria existed, perhaps its end was not a single moment of destruction, but a long forgetting. Imagine a culture built upon resonance and balance, vanishing not through war, but through silence. The knowledge that guided its towers and harmonics could have faded gradually, lost as generations turned from listening to conquering. The world began to value speed over stillness. The hum of stone became inaudible beneath the clatter of ambition. Across the great plains of Eurasia, traces linger in the geometry of later cities. A street that curves unexpectedly toward an ancient pole. Foundations that do not match the architecture above them. Brickwork whose pattern carries a rhythm older than the nation that claims it. These are not proofs. They are echoes. Historians find themselves divided between curiosity and caution. There are maps drawn in the 16th and 17th centuries that speak of regions named Tartary, a vast domain stretching from the Urals to the Pacific, from the Arctic down toward Persia and India. Yet these maps are often vague, their boundaries fluid, their origins uncertain. Was Tartaria a political term, a poetic one, or a shadow left by a civilization whose identity had already blurred into myth? The written record tells little, but the ruins tell more. If one learns to read their language, certain towers across Russia, Mongolia, and Central Asia bear an odd precision of proportion. The ratios of their base to their height mirror those found in harmonic sequences, the same intervals used in music and vibration. Their arches channel winding ways that create low frequencies, as if designed to hum with the earth itself. These may be coincidences, but coincidences that repeat too often begin to resemble intention. Imagine a network of builders who understood energy as music. When their knowledge began to vanish, the melody was interrupted, and the rhythm of their architecture broke. The later generations rebuilt, using fragments of the old forms, unaware of the science hidden within the beauty. The cause of this forgetting could have been as simple as language shifting. When meaning changes, knowledge can vanish even while the symbols remain. A word once used to describe resonance might come to mean spirit. A term for geometry might become myth. In this way, the sacred and the scientific could have exchanged names, leaving each only half remembered. Some scholars speak of great floods, of solar events, of cataclysms that swept across the planet 12,000 years ago and again in more recent millennia. Such events may have erased not just structures, but context. When survivors rebuild, they inherit stone without instruction. They might sense its power, but lack the pattern that awakens it. It is possible that Tartaria's memory was absorbed by those who came after, its architecture integrated, its stories retold in different tongues. The grand domes and spires of later empires may be descendants of forms once used to tune frequency, not merely to glorify rulers. The very word tower might once have meant conduit. The word temple might have meant amplifier. As time went on, the earth itself may have participated in the burial. Shifting rivers covered valleys. Winds carried dust from deserts that had once been forests. The resonance chambers fell silent, sealed beneath sediments and ice. Each century added another layer of forgetting, until only the faint outline remained, like a melody hummed by a dreamer half awake. Yet forgetting is not the same as loss. Beneath the surface, information lingers. Modern tools now allow us to see through layers once thought impenetrable. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and infrared photography reveal geometric traces under fields, plains, and even seas. Some resemble the patterns of known ancient cultures. Others do not. Scientists map these anomalies cautiously, aware of how easily imagination can distort data. But when the same hexagonal, circular, or spiral alignments appear across continents separated by mountains and centuries, the question arises, were these parallel discoveries or the echoes of a single, forgotten understanding? Perhaps Tartaria's true erasure was not the work of malice, but of neglect. A civilization built upon harmony could not have survived the rise of those that thrived on conquest. When the value of power shifted from resonance to control, the old ways became impractical. The wisdom of vibration gave way to the mechanics of domination. The balance broke. Still, the idea remains alluring because it speaks to something within us, a longing to believe that once humanity walked closer to the rhythm of the world, that we were not always estranged from the intelligence of matter. The possibility of Tartaria is not only about lost technology, it is about the memory of balance. In this sense, the myth serves a purpose even if the empire never existed. It reminds us that forgetting is part of the cycle. Each era must lose something precious to make space for rediscovery. Knowledge sleeps and wakes again in new forms. The harmonics of stone will one day return as quantum resonance or biophysics. The principle remains. The language changes. If Tartaria's name was erased from history, perhaps it was because history itself could not measure the kind of power it represented. Our chronicles record battles and reigns, not frequencies or vibrations. They remember what can be counted, not what can be felt. And so, the empire that once breathed with the pulse of the planet may still be here. Its energy woven quietly into the ground beneath our feet, forgotten not because it failed, but because it succeeded in becoming part of the earth again. The age of forgetting is never final. Beneath every silence, something waits to be heard once more. The silence left behind by a vanished civilization is rarely empty. It is filled with residue, with the language of shapes and alignments that whisper when observed patiently. Across the old world, certain structures speak in patterns, circles nested within squares, triangles pointing to stars, columns that carry proportion as if it were a kind of syntax. If Tartaria once existed, then this language might be its last surviving voice. The ancients often built not just for beauty, but for continuity. Each block was positioned with awareness of the heavens, each arch balanced by its shadow. Many ancient temples, whether in Anatolia, Egypt, or the far reaches of Asia, seem to share a grammar of proportion that transcends culture. These forms obey ratios identical to those found in wave frequencies and harmonic motion. The geometry itself becomes a bridge between sound and matter. In this sense, stone was not inert. It was alive in its response to vibration. A wall or a pillar could sing when the right tone was struck. We think of architecture as static, but to those who understood resonance, it was a form of music frozen in time. Tartarian builders, if they existed, may have been less concerned with durability than with harmony. Their cities could have been designed as orchestras, each structure tuned to the song of the earth. Across Siberia and the Caucasus, megalithic remains bear curious tool marks. Some look melted, others precise beyond the reach of ancient chisels. Conventional archaeology explains these as natural erosion or later repair, but viewed through another lens, they resemble signatures, notations left by engineers of frequency rather than of stone. Many myths describe languages that could command matter, words that shaped reality. These tales might be remnants of a science that understood vibration as creation itself. Sound, after all, arranges matter. A single tone can shape sand into complex mandalas. Multiply that by scale and intention, and architecture becomes an instrument of energy. Perhaps the tongues spoken of in ancient texts were not languages of grammar, but languages of resonance. The Tower of Babel, for example, has long been a symbol of human overreach. Yet what if its true lesson is not about pride, but about coherence? A people once united by frequency fall apart when their resonance divides. The confusion of tongues could be the loss of shared vibration, the collapse of a harmonic civilization into dissonance. Tartaria, if it was built on such unity, might have fallen when its harmony was broken. Symbols that persist across time have been designed to preserve fragments of this knowledge. The spiral, for instance, repeats endlessly across cultures. It mirrors galaxies, hurricanes, shells, and fingerprints. It is movement toward or away from center, expansion and contraction, the basic rhythm of energy. The Tartarian spiral, found in certain old engravings and domes, may not have been mere decoration. It might have represented the path of resonance itself, energy spiraling into form. Another symbol often connected to this mystery is the star. In ancient blueprints and textiles attributed to Central Asian tribes, the eight-pointed star dominates. It reflects balance between heaven and earth, between cardinal directions and elements. The same star appears in Mesopotamia, among the Sumerians and Babylonians. To them, it represented Inanna, the morning and evening light. Yet to others, it could have been geometry, a record of energy radiating symmetrically outward. The overlap of these symbols across cultures suggests that knowledge did not vanish completely. It diffused. Fragments of Tartarian understanding could have been absorbed by neighboring peoples, translated into myth, ritual, and architecture. As language changed, intention survived through form. Imagine an ancient engineer as that his civilization was nearing its twilight. He could not preserve the machinery or the books, but he could carve a pattern that would endure erosion. A spiral etched into stone, a ratio built into a doorway. These would become seeds of remembrance, waiting for rediscovery when humanity was ready again to hear them. Modern science has begun to notice what myth preserved. Cymatics, the study of how sound organizes matter, demonstrates that vibration can generate complex geometric forms. Magnetic fields can shape particles into lattice, identical to patterns seen in ancient ornamentation. The more we learn about frequency, the more the line blurs between physics and sacred design. Perhaps Tartaria was a civilization that stood at this intersection, a culture that did not separate the spiritual from the physical, or the artistic from the scientific. In such a world, building a temple was not worship, it was calibration. The divine and the measurable were the same pursuit, and understanding one meant understanding the other. If this is true, then the loss of Tartaria was not just the erasure of an empire, it was the dimming of an idea, the belief that harmony itself could be technology. We have since replaced it with machinery and equations, forgetting that resonance once guided our ancestors' hands as precisely as any blueprint. But the earth has memory. Energy leaves traces. Even when the builders are gone, the song remains within the stone, waiting for the next civilization willing to listen. Perhaps that is where we stand now, rediscovering through science what the ancients once practiced through intuition, learning that consciousness, vibration, and matter are not separate at all, but chords in the same cosmic composition. And if Tartaria truly existed, then it may not be lost. It may be humming quietly beneath us, its resonance faint but steady, reminding us that what is forgotten is never truly gone. As we look closer into what remains of Tartaria, one of the most striking clues does not come from legend, but from ink and parchment. For centuries, European, Persian, and Russian cartographers drew vast regions across Eurasia labeled simply as Tartaria. These maps were not hidden curiosities, but official depictions found in atlases, schools, and libraries. From the 1500s to the 1800s, the word spread across northern Asia, a continent of its own, its borders undefined yet confidently present. The shapes vary, as early maps always do, but the idea is consistent, a civilization sprawling from the Caspian to the Pacific, crossing what we now divide as Siberia, Mongolia, and northern China. Cities are marked with strange names unfamiliar to modern eyes. Symbols of fortresses and domed buildings dot the regions. To mapmakers of the Enlightenment, Tartaria was not myth. It was a matter of record. And then, something subtle begins to happen. By the mid-1800s, the name fades. The word vanishes from new editions of the very same atlases that once displayed it prominently. In its place appear the expanding empires of Russia and China, each absorbing the lands once marked as Tartary. By the century's end, the label has disappeared entirely, as if an entire world had been reclassified out of existence. This erasure is not the work of a single event. It is a slow redrawing of memory, a quiet rewriting of geography. Historians might say the change reflects political consolidation, but others look at the silence surrounding the transition and wonder whether something larger was lost, not only territory, but the story of who built upon it. In this absence, the imagination of the modern age turns downward, toward the ground itself. Beneath the old cities of Eurasia, strange architectural clues seem to emerge. Windows sunk below street level, doorways half buried, whole floors existing beneath the surface, yet built with the same precision and style as those above. It is from such details that the idea of the mud flood takes root. The theory suggests that sometime within the last few centuries, a massive flood of earth, perhaps liquefaction, perhaps sediment from a cataclysmic event, engulfed entire cities. Not a flood of water, but of mud and silt, rising high enough to bury the first floors of buildings, leaving only the upper levels visible. Over time, new ground was laid over the buried remnants, and the living simply built upward, layer upon layer, forgetting the depth beneath their feet. Architectural records lend some quiet support to the mystery. Many older buildings, particularly in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and even North America, show lower windows now submerged by soil, symmetrical with those above. Some staircases descend into what appear to be basements, only to open into rooms designed for daylight. The same level of craftsmanship continues below, suggesting these lower spaces were once meant to face the open air. Cities like St. Petersburg, Prague, and parts of Istanbul exhibit such features prominently. Even in the Americas, in places like San Francisco or Seattle, evidence of regraded streets and buried storefronts exist, remnants of floods, earthquakes, or human reshaping. In this broader context, the mud flood becomes not a single cataclysm, but a symbol of collective amnesia, a reminder that our urban landscapes are palimpsests, written and rewritten by both nature and time. If we connect this to the fading of Tartaria, a quiet question begins to form. What if the same era that saw the maps redrawn also saw parts of that old world quite literally buried? If great architectural traditions were swallowed by earth, only to have later generations rediscover them and mistake their craftsmanship for something recent, it would explain the strange uniformity of style seen across continents, the arches, the domes, the symmetry. Perhaps the flood was not a single event, but a pattern of collapse, social, geological, and historical, intertwined. Perhaps the soil itself became the archive, concealing entire chapters of human experience beneath its weight. There is a humility in this idea. It reminds us that history is fragile, that civilization can be covered, repurposed, or forgotten, not just in legend, but in brick and stone. A buried window is not proof of conspiracy, but of how easily the earth can shift beneath our confidence. A vanished name on a map is not always erasure by deceit, but sometimes erasure by neglect. And yet, when both occur, the disappearance of a name and the partial burial of its architecture, the silence becomes difficult to ignore. The ground itself begins to seem like a storyteller interrupted mid-sentence. The layers beneath our feet may hold the continuation. The buried levels might be the earlier paragraphs of a story we only began reading halfway through. Perhaps Tartaria, whatever it truly was, represents not just a lost empire, but a metaphor for all forgotten worlds, the civilizations that sleep beneath our own foundations, the memories pressed between maps and mud. If we could listen closely enough, we might hear the low hum of their presence in the stones, waiting to be remembered. When we begin to study these old structures with a patient eye, their precision seems to suggest an understanding beyond simple ornamentation. The arches, the columns, the balance of proportions, these were not random flourishes, but parts of an intentional geometry. The builders of the old world, whether they were the people we call Tartarians or an earlier lineage entirely, appeared to understand something profound about resonance. In many of the great surviving stone buildings across Eurasia, we find the same architectural ratios repeated. The height of domes in perfect harmonic relationship to their base diameter, windows placed not merely for light, but at intervals corresponding to acoustic notes. If one were to speak or sing inside some of these cathedrals, the sound does not simply echo. It lingers, transforms, and seems to envelop the listener, as though the air itself were part of the design. This is not mysticism. It is physics. Resonant frequencies can shape the way energy behaves within a structure. Stone, when arranged according to certain proportions, becomes a conduit for vibration. It stores sound, temperature, even the faint electromagnetic hum of the planet. The builders of these monuments seem to grasp this instinctively, creating spaces that interacted with their environment rather than merely standing upon it. There is an odd continuity here. The same proportional systems that appear in sacred buildings from St. Petersburg to Samarkand can be traced to temples in India, step pyramids in Mesopotamia, and even pre-Columbian architecture across the ocean. Each culture gave these patterns its own name, yet the underlying mathematics align, as if drawn from a shared blueprint. This is where the story deepens, not into fantasy, but into a quiet recognition that human understanding of harmony may have much older roots than we imagine. Some researchers suggest that the domes and towers of these ancient buildings were more than aesthetic. They may have acted as atmospheric resonators, drawing static electricity from the air and diffusing it through metal spires, plates, or internal chambers. The evidence is fragmentary, but intriguing. Copper adornments, grounded stone columns, and hollow cavities aligned along vertical axes. If this interpretation holds even partial truth, it would mean that architecture once served not only spiritual or civic purposes, but energetic ones, turning entire cities into subtle engines of balance. Consider how some of these cities were arranged. Wide radial streets converging upon central domes, networks of canals that mirrored the branching of veins or roots, decorative towers placed at regular intervals, as though calibrating invisible fields. To the modern eye, these are aesthetic marvels, but to the mind of an earlier engineer, they might have been instruments of coherence, designed to keep both the environment and the human body in resonance with the rhythms of the earth. In many of these structures, materials seem chosen as only for strength but for conductivity. Granite rich in quartz, marble infused with calcite, meticulous joints so tight that not even a blade can pass between them. When sunlight or heat passes through these stones, they generate small electric potentials over a vast network of buildings. Even these minor charges could create an ambient field, a living hum that intertwined with human activity. We cannot say for certain that this was the intention. What we can say is that these builders worked with an attention to vibration, sound, and form that modern science only recently began to rediscover. The idea that shape affects energy is now seen in the design of sound chambers, antennas, even modern materials research. Yet here it appears in stone, centuries or perhaps millennia before our rediscovery. The story of Tartaria, then, may not be about conquest or borders at all. It may be about knowledge, the kind that does not belong to a single nation, but to a pattern of understanding that has surfaced and disappeared across human history. The maps may have erased the name, but the architecture still whispers it in geometry and resonance. If we step inside one of these old cathedrals, still standing in cities once marked as Tartarian, we might feel something just beyond words. The hush of sound perfectly held within curved stone, the way light bends through colored glass and lands precisely upon a carved symbol, the sense of presence, as though the space itself is awake. Perhaps these sensations are not romantic projections, but the residue of an ancient science of harmony, a language built into architecture that speaks to the body rather than the intellect, a silent form of communication that does not need translation. And if that is true, then what we call the ruins of Tartaria might not be ruins at all. They may still be functioning instruments, humming softly in ways we no longer perceive, still doing what they were designed to do, to align the human being with the quiet order of the world. The mystery is not that these structures once worked, but that we forgot how to listen. If there was once a civilization that understood resonance as a way to live with the earth, then its loss was not simply the disappearance of a people. It was the fading of a frequency, a forgetting of how sound, shape, and energy could form a single language. somewhere between the slow decay of ancient empires and the roar of the industrial age. That language was silenced. The hum of stone and air was replaced by the mechanical rhythm of machines. Some trace this turning point to the time when maps began to change. The word Tartaria, once spread across vast territories of Eurasia, quietly disappeared. New borders were drawn. Old cities were renamed. The builders' marks were still carved into walls, but the meanings behind them were left out of the new histories. Yet the architecture itself could not be erased. Domes, spires, and walls remained, stubbornly carrying the same geometric ratios. Among these remnants, one structure stands out in its sheer scope: the Great Wall of China. To the modern visitor, it is a fortification. To the historian, a symbol of defense and empire. But when observed through the lens of resonance, its nature becomes more curious. The wall flows not as a straight barrier, but as a vast serpent of stone, winding over mountain crests in a rhythm that seems almost organic. Its watchtowers rise at regular intervals, like the nodes of a frequency pattern. Some scholars have quietly suggested that it may once have had purposes beyond military defense. The distribution of materials, bricks rich in quartz, stone foundations rooted deep into mineral veins, hints at an understanding of the land's conductive properties. In certain sections, magnetized rocks appear at patterned distances, as though positioned intentionally. Perhaps the wall once channeled or diffused natural energy, forming a subtle field of stability across the terrain. This is not so far removed from what modern engineers call atmospheric electricity. The Earth is wrapped in a constant current, a gentle flow of charged particles between the surface and the sky. Ancient builders may have felt this intuitively. Even if they lacked our terms for it, they may have shaped their cities, towers, and walls to harmonize with these invisible tides. Centuries later, a man would appear who seemed to rediscover this lost rhythm. Nikola Tesla, the visionary of the modern electric age, believed that the Earth itself was an immense conductor. He imagined energy not as something confined to wires, but as a vibration that could travel freely through the planet and the air. His Wardenclyffe Tower was meant to broadcast power without transmission lines, drawing from the natural electrical potential between Earth and atmosphere. It is tempting to see in Tesla a faint echo of those ancient builders. His tower, with its dome and grounding rods, mirrors the same principles found in the stone spires and metallic ornaments of old Tartarian structures. He spoke of tuning frequencies to resonate with the planet. The ancients may have done the same with architecture rather than machines. Tesla's tools were steel and copper. Theirs were granite and quartz. But the intention, harmony through resonance, may have been shared. The tragedy is that both stories end in silence. Tesla's tower was dismantled before it could prove its purpose. The ancient structures stand emptied of meaning, reduced to tourist destinations and architectural curiosities. In both cases, the song was interrupted. The pattern was left half complete. Yet perhaps the silence itself is instructive. Nature does not erase without reason. It allows cycles of remembering and forgetting, like breaths between words. What if the disappearance of Tartaria and the loss of its knowledge was not destruction but pause, a resting phase between civilizations that hear the earth and those that dominate it? Today, we build with glass and steel, guided by efficiency rather than resonance. Our cities hum with artificial frequencies that drown out the subtler tones beneath. Yet sometimes, in quiet corners of old towns, a fragment of the earlier order can still be felt. A courtyard that feels inexplicably calm, a cathedral that seems to breathe, a stone wall that hums faintly when the wind passes through its gaps. These are not coincidences. They are the persistence of memory within matter. If Nikola Tesla glimpsed that same memory in the language of electricity, then perhaps the builders of Tartaria embodied it directly in stone. The Great Wall, the golden domes, the precise symmetry, all of them may have been ways to communicate with the living field of the planet, not to exploit it, but to exist within it. When we look back now, we see fragments. A tower here, a blueprint there, but together they form the outline of a worldview that once placed harmony above power, the knowledge that energy, sound, and life were part of one continuum. The Great Wall still winds over the mountains. Tesla's notes still whisper of wireless energy. The ruins of forgotten cities still reflect light in ways that feel deliberate. Perhaps all of them are chapters of the same story, glimpses of humanity's long attempt to remember how to live in rhythm with the Earth's hidden music. The silence is not an ending. It may simply be the pause before the next note. The story of Tartaria, like many others that drift along the edges of recorded history, is not a call to believe or to disprove. It is an invitation to listen. Beneath the ruins, the forgotten names, and the rewritten maps, there lingers a murmur of continuity, something that has not been lost so much as buried beneath the layers of time. We walk across that buried world every day without noticing. The old foundations still lie beneath the cobblestones of modern cities. Rivers still follow ancient courses that once guided settlement and trade. Even the sky, constant and indifferent, carries the same stars that guided builders thousands of years ago. What we inherit from forgotten civilizations is not always material. It may come as instinct, a pull towards certain forms, a sense that beauty lies in proportion, in symmetry, in stillness. Architects still speak of balance and harmony, though they may not remember where those ideals began. Musicians still tune to scales that resonate with the harmonic frequencies of the natural world. In this way, the knowledge of resonance, whether Tartarian or otherwise, continues to live quietly within us. The notion that entire empires could vanish while their essence persists in the human hand and mind is not unusual. Time does not destroy everything. It transforms memory into intuition. It allows the wisdom of one age to become the creativity of another. Perhaps the maps that once labeled Tartaria were never meant to mark territory. Perhaps they were an expression of how people saw their connection to the world. To name a vast region under one title was to declare unity. The erasure of that name, then, mirrors our growing fragmentation, political, cultural, spiritual. The Tower of Babel within us has risen again, dividing our common voice into countless languages of misunderstanding. And yet, the same curiosity that leads us to rediscover lost empires is also the force that can heal that division. The drive to understand where we come from and what our ancestors knew carries within it the seed of reconnection. When we ask what was forgotten, we begin to listen differently to stone, to soil, to silence. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Tartaria, not its supposed technologies or its mysterious architecture, but the idea that humanity once lived in a rhythm that matched the Earth's, a civilization that saw itself not as separate from nature, but as an extension of it. If that memory were to awaken again, it would not come through conquest or revelation. It would come through quiet attention, through the act of feeling the ground beneath one's feet and knowing that it hums with the same frequencies that move within ourselves. Even Nikola Tesla, centuries after the fall of those ancient builders, seemed to intuit this. His work was not just about power, but about connection. He imagined a world where energy flowed freely, unbound, bridging the distances between people and continents. His dream failed in form, but not in essence. It remains alive wherever human beings imagine a more harmonious way to live. As the story of Tartaria folds into the long tapestry of our species, we are reminded that the Earth itself keeps the truest record. The soil remembers the pressure of walls that no longer stand. The magnetic fields still carry the imprints of ancient constructions. The air above ruins still vibrates faintly when the wind moves through broken arches. These are not ghosts. They are signals waiting for recognition. If time is a kind of erosion, then memory is the pattern that remains when everything else has worn away. Every generation inherits a slightly fainter version of that pattern, but it endures. The questions we ask today are part of that entrance. They are how we reassemble what was scattered. Perhaps there was never a grand empire called Tartaria, or perhaps there was, stretching from the steppes to the frozen north, built on knowledge that joined sound, matter, and spirit. Either way, the truth it gestures toward remains valuable. It asks us to consider what harmony with the earth might look like now. In our own age of noise and distraction, the silence left behind by lost civilizations is not empty. It is full of potential, like a pause in music. It prepares us for what comes next. If we listen closely, we may find that we already carry within us the echoes of what was forgotten, and that remembering is simply another form of becoming. The stones beneath our feet, the pulse of the planet, the soft static of the stars, all are speaking, as they always have. We need only slow down long enough to hear. Thank you for joining this reflection on what may have been humanity's greatest erased empire. If you have found calm or curiosity in this journey, I invite you to subscribe and continue exploring with us. Tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Until next time, rest well. Good night.